Derek Fildebrandt, publisher of the Western Standard, and you're watching The Pipeline. Today is November 6th, the day after the United States' big general election. It's all mega, so much mega. I'm joined as usual by Western Standard opinion editor Nigel Hannaford.
Good to be here.
And Western Standard senior Alberta columnist Cory Morgan.
Always a pleasure.
I don't know if
for a late night, eh?
Yeah.
That was a very late night, gentlemen. We were here till 12:30. We pulled the plug. We were waiting for Donald Trump to come on. We just gave up and said, "Yeah, watch it on the TV, guys. We're not going to stream it." 10 seconds after we pulled our stream, Donald Trump comes out. But yeah, quite something. We're going to be talking today as well about the resounding leadership review results of Alberta Premier Danielle Smith. But before we get to that, we're going to have just a double segment of mega. Trump won bigly. So big. So great. I've even got my Make Mongolia Great Again hat today. Not quite mega, but I await the return of the Great Khan. All right. Well, let's before we get into it, let's just kind of look at the results. We have a very clear idea now. Here, let's bring up the map here, Nico. So here's where we're at using 270towin.com. Everything has been solidly called, with the sole exception, of course, of Arizona. Now, Arizona's going to go Republican. I have a hard time seeing how it doesn't. But that's 11 electoral college votes. It's the only one outstanding. But right now, they're only 67% reporting. What is wrong with these guys? It's Nevada and Arizona. It's always, where all the casinos are, and they can't seem to count.
Yeah, just get fried in the desert, I guess.
Yeah. But you see here, this is a Republican-leaning state in any case. Trump won every single swing state. So let's quickly run through the swing states. So we've got Nevada, swing state. Trump won pretty decisively. We've got Wisconsin. So this is the blue wall. Trump won by 1%, not by a huge margin, but he's got Wisconsin. We've got Michigan. Donald Trump takes Michigan just a little over a percentage. Again, not a lot, but these are the blue wall states. Democrats need to win them. They don't win them, they're pretty toast. Pennsylvania. Trump winning more convincingly there. Still not huge margins, but 50.5 to 48.5. And Ohio. We'll show you Ohio here. Big win. Ohio started to look like a red state almost, 55.2% to 53.9%. Ohio should not be that red. When we saw Ohio going that red and early, I was like, yeah, it's going to be a bad night for the Democrats.
Be a favorite son effect.
It could be a bit of J.D. Vance, perhaps. You got North Carolina, swing state, 51.1% Trump, 47.7% Kamala Harris, and Georgia. Used to be a solid Republican state, but it is now. It's now a switcher. It moves around. We got Trump 50.7 to 48.5. Solid night for Trump. He won every single swing state up there. So we had a late night last night, gentlemen, but it looked pretty early, like it was looking good for Trump, and there was no back and forth at all. No state went back and forth. They went red, and they got redder throughout the night. Initial thoughts?
That was actually one of the most fortifying things watching this thing through. And in terms of what's it going to be like when it's all over? The whole thing was very definite. It was very much, there was a mood, and it was being expressed, and it was being revealed as the results came in. And this was important to me, at least, because it meant there was far less excuse for argument after it was all over. If there'd have been backwards and forwards and more boxes coming in, and oh gosh, we got another pile over here, that's the kind of thing that would have made a very uncertain election. But it wasn't like that. There definitely was a mood. that's not to say that the country is together. Clearly, they're pretty much 50% by 50% divided between those who like the way Trump does things and those who would have preferred just about anything else. But Trump did win, and it's not arguable. He even had the popular vote.
This is the first time a Republican's actually got the popular vote in 20 years since George W. Bush against John Kerry, 2004.
So it's a strong result, and it should resolve things. And I noticed the stock market this morning just went straight up. And I'd like to say that was a Trump effect, but I think it was a certainty effect.
Possibly.
Now we know what the deal is.
I mean, this was I was expecting Trump. I was, without a lot of certainty, leaning towards a Trump win yesterday. I did not have in the cards a decisive Trump win. I thought in probability, he was going to eke it out. The polls tend to always underrepresent conservatives and Republicans, particularly with Trump, because it's not very nice at a fancy cocktail party to say you support Trump. So people tend to, I think Republicans, especially Trump voters, are underreported. But he won decisively. Most likely he's going to come out at 312 electoral votes over Harris's 216. Popular vote, it's actually continuing to go up. He's at 1.5% over Harris. And the way the Electoral College votes is, if the two candidates are tied in electoral vote, the Republican wins. And he outright won the Electoral College, the popular vote too. He's carried the Senate. He is likely, but not positively, but likely carrying the House of Representatives as well. And he's already got the Supreme Court. Did Biden get to nominate a single justice?
No, that's what I can remember.
Oh, it's still Trump's court. Yep. This is the most resounding Republican control of the United States government probably ever, Corey. At least since Reconstruction.
Yeah, I'm not going to start digging anyway. So, I mean...
He didn't go after Reconstruction, that's it.
And the stability in itself, that's the other part that I think, as Nigel was saying, with the stock market's responding to. We've got something that's definitely going to be predictable as far as who's in power, and we're not going to be scrapping in the courts and messing around and dealing with months of that sort of thing.
Well, let's hope not.
No, and we're not seeing indications of it. Kamala Harris is making it clear she's going to concede. It's not going to be a battle on that front. There'll always be some other individuals, I guess, but it's not realistic. I guess the big question now is, let's hope then we've got a party that has an incredible amount of power now. Let's hope they use it wisely in this next couple of years, and we see some positive changes. That's what we've got to hope for at this point.
Let's talk about Kamala Harris. I think it was a real disgrace last night that she did not have the intestinal fortitude to stand up and say anything. She didn't even need to necessarily concede last night. If there was a small glimmer of hope, I mean, by the time we called, so we're done. I mean, it was very clear. But even if she didn't concede, she should have at least gotten up and thanked the people who voted for her and worked for her, the people who knocked on doors for months, hammered in signs. She didn't have to do it through the winter because she didn't face a Democratic primary process. But people who worked for her, who volunteered for her, who donated money to her, they show up at her headquarters.
Don't underestimate the difficulties of pounding a sign into the hard-packed Arizona soil. It hasn't seen water for a month.
As I said last night, I've won an election and I've lost an election. You got to speak both times. One is a lot more fun than the other one is. But when you lose, it's actually even more important to speak. At the very least, to thank the people who busted their butts for you. And she just couldn't do it. And it was the same with Hillary Clinton. And I think it's not helping the cause of America eventually having a woman president. That you've now had two, both got trounced, and both didn't have, not that Trump was particularly graceful when he lost last time, he didn't concede, but at least he stood up and talked to his people. And you can argue if that was a good thing or bad things that he said, but at least he had the guts to stand up, as has every single defeated presidential candidate in American history, except for Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris. Neither of them, as far as I know.
I think Gore never came out that night with.
But I don't know if he came out or not. But that was legitimately hanging in the air. There was nothing.
I understand. I'm just saying though. He same sort of thing as with Kamala though. Well, I mean, it was still
he was not,
could have been.
He was not clearly defeated that night at all. That was very much going to go to the courts. It was in the balance.
But we're saying the same thing. He could have come out without conceding at least.
I'm not sure.
And I don't believe he came because I was sitting up late that night. And I remember everybody was waiting forever. Is he going to come out? And it was finally like an announcement. Yeah, they've decided they're not going to come out yet.
I don't remember.
Yeah. Either way, it's very rare though.
Yeah.
That I don't want to understand.
So it's not a good look. But Kamala Harris is going to be conceding. I saw. Oh, it was such a great. Where is it? I don't have it here. It was such a great headline from the. I think it was the Onion. Trump calls Kamala Harris to congratulate himself. I thought it just summed up kind of both of them from last night very well. I don't know your thoughts, Corey, on how she comes out of this and how the Democratic Party comes out of this.
I don't know. They've got a lot of introspection to do at this point. They got 4 years to work on it. I mean, they're conceding, so there's going to be a lot of changes. I mean, Kamala Harris is clearly a spent force. She's not going to come out of the ashes like Trump did, for example, which is a very exceptional case. Mm-hmm. And
he is now only the second non-consecutive two-term president in American history. The last being Grover Cleveland in the 1880s.
Yeah, so they've got to work on. Figure out how they're going to be relevant in the next couple of years with such an overwhelming Republican control of every single part of the American system right now, and just making a good showing for themselves as they figure out how they could change that circumstance 4 years from now.
So I'm fairly confident saying Kamala Harris will go down as the worst DEI hire in history. Someone who was clearly never up to the task of the offices she held, who just managed by a combination of social grace and then checking off the right DEI boxes to be able to climb the ladder. She didn't get a single delegate in the Democratic primaries when she ran for the Democratic presidential nomination in 2020. Not a single delegate, but she checked the right boxes, so Joe Biden put her on the ticket. Okay. And then you had the effective internal party coup where she replaces Biden on the ticket. She faced she did not have to face the forge of a party nomination process. And she melted under the heat of a general election campaign, particularly against a ferocious opponent like Donald Trump. But I think she did better than Joe Biden would have. But that's because Joe Biden's brain doesn't work anymore. The Democrats would have been so much better served having an open primary process. DEI, the idea of diversity hires is crumbling everywhere. Major businesses that have been on board with it, I think it's going to get them good press for a long time. They're all getting out. It is now, the pendulum is swinging hard. Nigel, do you think the Democratic Party is going to maybe do serious reflection on the idea of constant identity politics, that everything is identity politics, diversity hires? Trump, I think, won the Latino vote.
Yeah, he did. And there's some activists really shooting at, I've seen some bizarre stuff while it's online. We're going to see bizarre stuff, but so some activists calling Latinos white nationalists. Yeah. And again, you guys, you haven't learned your lesson then. If you're going to pull these kinds of stunts. But also, I mean, this is just the day after.
25% of blacks. He did. Trump did better with Latino voters than any Republican since Nixon in 1972, and better with black voters than any Republican since the 1950s under Eisenhower. The great white nationalist Nazi candidate seems to be doing better than any Republican in modern history with minority voters. So, Nigel, do you think the Democratic Party is going to do a legitimate rethink on their obsession with identity politics?
Obviously, it did not work for them. They will reflect on that and they will make changes. The puzzle to me is that it took a defeat like this to knock them off their high horse. Much as I deplore what the Democratic Party has come to stand for, I have never said that they were stupid people. But now there is such a parade of stupidity through this last 4 years that I'm starting to think, well, maybe I overestimated their intelligence and their motivations, because Look at the things that they have done. Never mind the DEI just for a moment, because I think that's actually a very big part of their problem. But how they managed to misunderstand what was on the hearts of what they thought was their biggest pack of supporters, which was the women of America. They thought abortion was the issue. When you actually turn to the polls, abortion was, I think, about 14%. What was the leading concern for American women was the economy, because they're the ones who go to the grocery stores and they know what things cost and they know that they don't bring as much home. So first, the second thing was their habit of insulting their voters. That comment made by one of their surrogates, I guess surrogate is the new buzz term for this. If I go out and give a speech, I'm a surrogate for you, Derek. So there you go. Look, it's if you have somebody say there are no strong women around Donald Trump, and then you look at that stage last night when Trump came out and they all filed out and stood behind him, there were a bunch of women there who I would say were strong women, effective. Sure, they were beautiful, that's expected. But these are people that you can hand a big job to and say, go and do it and expect it to get done. Melania Trump speaks 5 languages and has a little side business in high fashion. It was a ridiculous thing to say, and you don't bring people to yourself by shaming them. It's like Barack Obama. Okay, so with all those strikes against them, they then come in and emphasize that people are identified by this Marxist critique of it's all identity, oppressors and oppressed. You're not white, so you must by definition be oppressed.
Then you have different degrees.
Yeah,
because a Latino is still a white nationalist to a black, and then Jews are now white nationalist Nazis.
Yes.
So I have a hard time keeping it straight.
If they don't rethink this, they are doomed to win. I beg your pardon. They are doomed to lose again in 2028. You can't do this.
I do think that, as you said, there are many intelligent people in there. I mean, this is a shakeup. I suspect. I mean, right now we're seeing the hotheads speaking and so on, but the wise ones are being quiet right now and they're thinking. And I think they're gonna rebuild. They're gonna reevaluate that approach. I mean,
James Carville will come on your show.
James Carville was the name I was thinking of as someone he's been warning the Democrats that you're not gonna win the votes of men by shaming men for being men. Playing identity politics. Maybe it'll work with those groups, but then you're going to alienate these other groups here. In fact, but it didn't work with a lot of these minority groups. Trump also nearly won with women. I think Kamala had a minor edge, but Biden outperformed Kamala Harris with women compared to Harris here. Both Kamala Harris and Hillary Clinton making the first woman president of the United States such a key part of their campaign. And that appeals, I guess, to a certain segment of the Democratic Party, but it doesn't, I think, resonate with the broader American public. And you'll see some of the hotheads in the Democratic Party right now saying, "Well, this just shows the American people aren't ready for a woman president." No, they weren't ready for Hillary Clinton, and they weren't ready for Kamala Harris. Those people were judged and found wanting. America surely will have a woman president at some point. My best guess is that person is likely to be a Republican, though. We've seen this in other places. We saw Margaret Thatcher in the United Kingdom.
Golda Meir in Israel.
Yep. What's her name in Italy? I can never remember.
Meloni, Giorgia Meloni.
Yeah.
Indira Gandhi in India.
Yeah. Imperfect example, Angela Merkel in Germany. She was a moderate conservative when she started. She left as a treasonous socialist by the time she was done. But she started as a middling, competent.
She was competent. She's smart.
But she was a nominally a conservative, at least. The left doesn't tend to produce many. I mean, I guess New Zealand, what her name was. But for the most part, because I think they're making the argument, you have to elect this person because they're a woman. And that's not an appealing argument to a man. In fact, it's not an appealing argument to a lot of women either. So I think America is going to eventually have a female president, but that is going to be a Republican.
The thing with DEI is that it is based on resentment. You need resentment between classes and identities in order for any advantage to be conferred. As a consequence, that's what the Democratic campaign projected, was dourness, forget the joy stuff.
Wasn't much joy.
There wasn't much joy. It was basically a complaint and a lament, whereas the Trump team certainly were pretty hard, but they knew how to have fun as well. I mean, don't want to go back to talking about garbage trucks and McDonald's, but you know, there's a playful side to that leadership team, which is very attractive. And I think a lot of people say, "Oh, whatever," you know, they just kind of enjoyed it, voted for it. DI is poison.
Indeed. Okay, let's bring the map back up. I want to shift gears. It's not as exciting as the big headline Trump-Harris battle, but let's talk about Congress because it really matters. So, in addition to Trump's own win, Republicans have taken clear control of the Senate. They were only down one seat, and they were defending a handful. The Democrats were playing defense a lot more. For Canadians who aren't aware of how it works, only 1/3 of the Senate is elected every 2 years. So it turns over roughly 33 seats at a time. So it's not all up for election. So, and just this cycle happened to be the Democrats were on playing defense a lot more. And so the Republicans have easily taken control. They're at 52 seats right now. That could get up to 55. It's going to be between 52 and 55. Either way, they've got clear control of the Senate. And then the House of Representatives, that one's a bit more complicated. The Republicans already had a majority. It'd be very odd for Trump to win on a Republican wave, the Senate to move on a Republican wave, then the House of Representatives to go the other way. Now, local races, individual candidates matter a hell of a lot more in American politics than in Canada, because individual members of Congress and senators actually kind of get to vote as they want to. There's pressure from their parties, but they can buck their party's trend because there's no party leader who takes your nomination away. You have a primary instead, unless you're Kamala Harris. But the Republicans are at 210 seats in the House of Representatives right now. Democrats at 194, 31 still up for grabs. Republicans are likely to maintain there, although I would have thought they would have maybe made bigger gains in the House of Representatives. Doesn't look very likely that they will. But and then Trump, as we said earlier, has the Supreme Court. It's a pretty solidly conservative court at this point. It looks, at least for these 2 years before the next midterms, the Republicans can do anything they want.
They need to do it wisely. There is one of the strengths of the American system is that there is usually, even if you've lost the election, there is usually some place where you can take a little hope. Well, we lost the presidency, but we got the House of Representatives. Well, we lost the House of Representatives, but at least we managed to nominate a couple of Supreme Court judges. And conservatives over the last 4 years have often found themselves thinking those kinds of compensatory thoughts, and it gives you hope and it gives you confidence in the system. Now, right now, if you are a Democrat, and if you're one of the kind of people who we like to caricature, where exactly do you take any hope and confidence in the system?
Well, the United States is a federation. They can look to they still have some governor's mansions, some state houses.
Well, they can,
but at the federal level, they're defeated.
They can move to New York or they can move to California. But you see what I'm saying? Unless there is some place where you say, okay, that's a little bit of mine there, and I'm holding on to it, and as long as it's there, the system is working for me. Now, I wouldn't for a moment want to change any of the results that we reviewed last night, but there is an onus on the governing party to remember that there are other people that they have to serve. Not for a moment do I want them to take the eye off the ball and the things they promised to do, but it's a matter of the style. Like right now, I think a lot of us who were hoping for a Trump win, and I'm guilty of this myself, we're kind of taking the first 24 hours to gloat. Okay, we have to go through that, and then we've got to put that on one side and say what are the serious interests of everybody here. Hopefully that thought is already deeply embedded in the administration.
So I'm not sure many Canadians know about this, but there's something called the Senate filibuster. It applies particularly in the Senate, not so much in the House of Representatives, but it allows the minority party, as long as they've got more than 40 seats, I think. And it's extremely rare that anyone's got more than 60 seats for a party in the Senate. That just doesn't really happen much anymore. But the minority party to stop the majority party from going too far and imposing its will. The Democrats have been pretty hot about getting rid of the Senate filibuster, because for a while they had the House of Representatives, the Senate, and the presidency. They lost the House, but they still had the Senate. They wanted to get rid of that.
I think they'll be quiet about that for a while now.
I have a feeling that issue hits the back burner for now. Now, the Republicans, to your point, Nigel, they could say, you know what? Maybe you guys were right for the last 4 years. Let's get rid of the filibuster. But I think that would be quite unmagnanimous, and it would be extremely short-sighted because no one gets to govern forever.
What was that great John Williamson quote that you had last night about?
Someone else mentioned it, and I was one who said it was John Williams. It was no defeat is permanent, no victory everlasting, or something like that. You will eventually. Now, Oprah said that this could very possibly be the last election in America. When I see the Enabling Act tabled, I'll reconsider her thoughts. But until then, no, it's not. Also, if you're going to set up a dictatorship, you should probably do it before you turn 80 years old. There's not really much of a point in abolishing elections when you don't have. He's not a spring chicken. This is going to be his last term, obviously, constitutionally it is, and it's just not going to come around that he's going to try and change it. This is his term. I think it's the danger for the Republicans now is overconfidence. They have a resounding mandate. They've got total control, but overconfidence now. They probably should move aggressively. They've got their 2 years before the midterms to make big changes. Start deporting the illegals, cut the budget,
build the wall,
or finish building the wall. I want your thoughts, Cory, though, on the unity ticket. This was an interesting concept. You had Kamala Harris. She tried to balance her ticket by finding a frumpy white dude like Waltz. Okay, but then everyone at her rallies was it was Beyonce. It's Taylor Swift. It was all celebrities, just A-list celebrities. Trump, by contrast, he brings in RFK, Elon Musk, these kinds of characters. Maybe, do you want to speak just first about how that involved the campaign, but then I think more importantly, what role they're going to play in shaping this? How is this be different from a previous Trump administration or other administrations in general? Is it going to be a more decentralized, hands-off? Is Trump going to be the chairman? President, or is he going to be the CEO president? Those are two different roles.
I hope he delegates, because he's not a deep policy thinker, whatever he may be. He's no fool, but he's a showman. He's a politician. He's a front man. I don't like the thought of him drafting specific policy if you're going to talk about healthcare or cutting the civil service. I hope. I mean, it was an interesting exercise too of building different camps and bringing in support. Likewise, RFK has some questionable views on medicine that I don't, but since they don't have
he's a bit woo-woo.
Nationalized healthcare, it's not as much of a concern. He can promote the theories that he likes, but it's not a control of what can or can't be done. And it certainly would pacify the people with concerns about vaccinations. What I'm most interested in is Elon Musk, though. He showed how you can gut a large organization with a lot of bloat with Twitter. And as much as everybody said, that's it, it's going to fall apart, it's going to die. No, Twitter just proved itself more powerful than it's ever been. Musk, whatever he might be, he gets things done. He gets to the point. How much interest and time? He's also an interesting character. His interest is fleeting. So if he wants to dedicate getting into and actually working on rebuilding that civil service, now's the opportunity. You got those 2 years before the midterms. You've got the houses, because it's going to be a battle. So if you're going to take the knife to things, do it now. Is he going to? Is Trump going to give him the authority to? Is he interested actually really in going further now that it's...
I think got better things to do is making humanity interplanetary.
Well, that's what I mean. I mean, he's the picture of a genius kid with attention deficit disorder. So, you know, the election's done. I got to work on my rockets now. You know, we'll see. But I mean, it's going to be very interesting to see who he pulls around and actually puts into those, because the cabinets are different in the states. Something to let our listeners realize as well. We draw our cabinets exclusively, typically from the elected individuals. That's not the case in the United States. You can pull some people into some powerful positions, and they are not elected to them. And that's really where the opportunities are going to be, good or bad, for President Trump. So this next couple of months is going to tell a tale.
All right. Let's turn our attention closer to home here. Bit of a smaller election or vote, but still, by far, it was the largest political convention in Canadian history in any province for any party, federal or provincial. The Alberta United Conservative Party's convention in Red Deer. Probably the biggest gathering ever in Red Deer. I mean, maybe a concert's rivaled it, maybe. I don't know. And the big item on the agenda was her leadership review vote. Now, all three of us were there. A bunch of the Western Standard crew was there. And I think we were all predicting she was going to be fine. She was, I mean, you need, 50% plus one is not enough to stay as leader. It would open up, the knives come out hard for you then. But my prediction was 83. She came in at 91.5. An absolutely triumphal result for Smith. We'll start with you, Nigel. I think at this point it's safe to say her leadership is unassailable, short of an absolute atomic faceplant on something.
Yeah. So what we actually had was 50% plus 2,401. I rest my case. That was enough. So I sometimes wonder why we paid so much attention to those stories about the people who were there to undermine her. I mean, there were 400 people who voted against her, yeah. But gosh, did we fall for our own preconceptions? It turned out there was nothing there, nothing to speak of. Clearly, I mean, the wonderful thing about this, for the sake of all Albertans, is that the Premier now is very clear that she has the total support of her party. If there is any dissent within the caucus, they wouldn't dare raise their heads at the moment. And she is about to go head-to-head with the federal government on their own lawsuit against the federal government, telling them to back off on the emissions cap, and also we're heading into winter when this whole business of the secure supply of electricity is going to be on everybody's mind, even as the federal government continues to call for net zero by 2035. So it's good that whether you're a member of the NDP, or whether you're a member of the UCP, if you are living in Alberta at this particular moment in Alberta's history, it is essential that the leadership be strong in the face of what is really a predatory federal government.
I think we'll kind of continue with Nigel's point about, why did we pay so much attention to those coming after her leadership? Those of us in the room, before you get in the room, you never really know how many people are they going to bust there. What are they going to do? One of the groups was Take Back Alberta, David Parker, who, and that organization, and he played a significant role in helping take down J.C. Kenney. So there was some history there, thinking, okay, well, they were a part of it. We know who these guys are. That organization played a role supporting Smith's election as UCP leader. Its slate of candidates won in both the last two annual general meetings for their slate of candidates on the board. So they had a track record. But I just had a pretty strong feeling going into this that train's run out of steam. It doesn't have the heft anymore. And then we saw the result. It had nothing. It was done. And then there was also then the so-called 1905 committee. There's really only 2 people publicly associated with it. I just wasn't seeing anything big around it. But, I mean, it is relatively unusual that you have organized groups trying to push out the leader at a convention. Normally, these things are behind the scenes and it's kind of quiet and everyone smiles in public, but then quietly you try to move people around. That was not the case when Jason Kenney went down. There was massive organized resistance against him and it won. So I think maybe it was just kind of Jason Kenney syndrome from what happened last time that was projected on. So Cory, we got the 2 organizations there, Take Back Alberta, 1905 committee. They were absolutely destroyed by Smith's result.
Those of us watching things knew. We really did. I mean, I was confident before saying she's going to get 85% at least. Like people watching from outside, they could point at and say, look how much impact Take Back Alberta had on Jason Kenney. And that's absolutely true. People saying conservatives are often pulled down by their own. Again, absolutely true. But they haven't watched when that actually happens, or they're ignoring what was to be seen when that happened. I mean, when you see the internal ones, those of us tied in will still, we can smell the whisper campaigns. We know what's going on. We don't necessarily know who, but you know what's going on. And with Take Back Alberta, it was very transparent when they went after Premier Kenney. There were dozens and dozens and dozens of well-attended meetings, a very aggressive schedule, a very tightly organized get out the vote strategy to ensure that people voted against Kenney. Absolutely none of that had happened. All we saw was David Parker speaking on social media and a brochure campaign once the AGM hit. So that network just wasn't there. So there's no way they could have been organizing to pull that together. There was no pile of 1905 meetings or even an unknown group. You can't, especially when you've got a group of 6,000 people you're trying to influence. You're not going to do that in the dark. You're going to see the rumblings. You're going to see these meetings. And I just didn't see it. I just saw the usual characters and suspects who like to organize around the peripheries, these things, making noise, but never actually getting anywhere. Smith should still take things seriously. I mean, the risk to a conservative leader from within is always very real. She's gotten a pass and a strong mandate today, and that can be very different 2 years from now. So she's not going to face another review before the next election.
No, she's not scheduled to. But let's remember, Jason Kenney's leadership review was not a scheduled one. It was effectively a recall.
It can
the
be
constituencies
provoked,
essentially called constituency associations had called a special general meeting, effectively forcing a recall vote of them. Now these things are part of the UCP's constitution, where they're done every few years. But their strategy even at the event was strange. I mean, they had these handouts with report cards claiming that Smith is weak on COVID stuff, when in fact she's probably the most radically anti-mandate leader of a head of government.
Good as they're going to get.
Like she's her only rival for the top spot is like Ron DeSantis. So I don't know what you're getting at. These groups had no one put their name on it, so we don't know who officially was behind it. But we have an idea. There was the one handout saying Danielle Smith is going to impose Sharia law on Alberta. And I was wondering, like, how's that going to play? And I don't think, I think that hurt them because it was so obviously over the top. And then they had no actual events there. There was no visible, real presence of, we're the anti-Smith group. We're having hospitality suite. Come have a beer with us.
It was a flyer campaign is all it was.
Yeah, it was a paper tiger campaign. And it just there was no there. I guess the question, Nigel, is the media, and by media, I mean Dwayne Bratt, going to continue to be quoted talking about people who they don't actually know ad nauseum here about this fake coup in the party that just never existed?
Well, the answer to that question specifically is yes, they will, because it is Dwayne Bratt's telephone number that they have. If they were to ask around, they could probably get Barry Cooper's. In fact, I would be pleased to forward it to my erstwhile colleagues at the Calgary Herald, a bunch of telephone numbers for conservative academics and conservative thinkers who would give them a different point of view than that offered by Dwayne Bratt. But that's kind of, I don't mean any disrespect to Mr. Bratt either, Dr. Bratt. He's entitled to his point of view, and when he's asked to give it, sure, he gives it. But I do think that the mainstream media would be doing everybody a favor if they just asked a few more questions. May I tell you one anecdote to that point? The year was 2006. And at that time, the Premier Danielle Smith was still a columnist at the Calgary Herald. And both of us had to work late to comment on whatever was going to happen in the January 2006 federal election that was going to bring the Stephen Harper government to power. And once the matter was settled, somebody came down the corridor and said, "Hey, guys, do you have any conservative contacts? We don't have anybody to ask for a comment." Obviously, we gave them what we had, and they went off and did their story. But that is very typical, unfortunately, of the media, that they have one point of view and one set of go-to people to support that point of view. Seldom do they get into the uncomfortable zone of where they get both sides of the story.
It's just these people, they don't actually know conservatives. That's why I try to be, when we talk about internal NDP politics here, I try to be self-aware that I'm not a socialist. I'm not a leftist progressive. Now, I actually do know some, and I can actually get along and have a beer with these people, but I'm not one of them. So while I might try to get in their brain, I'm very self-aware that I'm not them. I do not think like them, and I just don't think we see the same self-awareness on the other side.
Yeah, like we couldn't speak to the nuts and bolts that would go on in a union-backed sort of organizing is organizing, but there's different intricacies and things that they were immersed in for many years, and they would be able to speak to. Gil McGowan, as loony as he is, would be able to speak very well to what's going on behind the scenes in the NDP. We're a lot more in tune to be able to speak to what happens in these conservative organizations. But as Nigel's saying, media doesn't call people like ourselves.
Because they literally don't know who they are.
Yes.
They don't. They might know a couple of the buzz name, highlights, but they don't know the culture of it. They don't know who's behind it. There was a couple. There was TBA, and then there's two names associated with 1905, and I just couldn't find anyone else involved. In fact, I knew a bunch of TBA organizers who were aggressively handing out like pro Danielle Smith buttons and stuff at the convention. I was like, I'm just not smelling any rebellion.
It was more of an opposition for the sake of opposition at that point, I think. And, on the TBA part, anyway.
Okay. Well, we're going to put a pin in it there and turn to our parting shots. We'll start with you, Corey.
Geez, it was like a no huddle, play between shows. I just came off mine into here, so I hadn't dwelled on it. Parting shot, I just want to send my love in a sarcastic way to Stephen Guilbeault as he's gone and lobbed the nugget into the punch bowl out here with his emissions cap, which is just clearly, again, modeled as a political play. It's not, even if it came about, it's not going to come until after the next election. I guess thanks for giving us lots of fodder to work on in the next few months, Mr. Guilbeault, and allowing regionalists like me to entrench even deeper in the West.
Nigel.
As a longtime reader of Ayn Rand, I felt in the last few years that we were kind of living in the last chapter of Atlas Shrugged. I think something has changed there. Anyway, there's something about the Trump team. Musk is sending a man to Mars. Ramaswamy built a high-tech empire, and Trump himself changed the skyline of New York. What did any of the Democrats ever do? And it looks like Atlas is finally picking up the ball. Maybe so.
For my parting shot, let's just bring up my screen here for a moment. My favorite character of this election. Peanut.
Yes.
Peanut the squirrel. I said it last night. I'll repeat it again. High school students in social studies are going to be taught 60 years from now how the government's execution of this poor, innocent, cute little squirrel changed America. I don't know what degree he played a role, but it gave it was a very last minute kind of cultural moment, emphasizing the excesses of the administrative state. And it's just the cutest little squirrel. Here's another one, Peanut may have been executed by Democrats, but he lives on. He lives on in us. And I think there should be a memorial statue put up to him somewhere. There'll be a what do you want to bet? There's going to be a bust of Peanut the Squirrel in the White House in a few months. Right. All right. That's it for me. Nigel, Cory, thank you for joining. And thank all of you for joining us today. Remember, if you're not yet a member of the Western Standard, you really need to be. The Western Standard is one of just a tiny, tiny handful of media left in Canada that do not take Justin Trudeau's federal media bailout money. And it's very, very expensive to us to not take. So we need you to step up and become a member of the Western Standard. It's only $10 a month or $100 a year. You can do it quickly at westernstandard.news. And being a member gets you past that pesky paywall that stops you from reading our stuff. The Western Standard has got more reporters than even most of the big newspapers left in Canada. So it's well worth your money, and you'll be supporting one of the last free press organizations left on this side of the border. Thank you very much for joining us today, and God bless.